Okay, here is the campaign dresser in walnut, and it is done. And actually I do have a minor adjustment here, and I think here the drawer box is actually tilted out just a tiny bit, but we'll look at that later. Anyway, this bad boy is done. It is veneered walnut. It's beautiful. It has a matte lacquer on it, and it has nice brassy campaign style hardware. So yeah, watch this video. Let me know what you think about this particular piece. And people seem to like walnut, so I just made this thing out of walnut, but you could make it literally out of anything. You know, cherry would look nice. Some other wood, sapele, would probably be kind of nice. But anyway, yeah, it's a good piece. Enjoy the video. We're gonna make a dresser today. We're gonna make a campaign style dresser. The dresser is gonna be 35 tall by 60 wide and 18 deep. So we gotta find some material on what the hell I'm gonna build this thing out of. See here, we've got, what is this? Looks like we got lots of Baltic birch. We've got a sheet of maple. We got in here some more plywood. This is all gonna be cherry wood, cherry. So no walnut sheets. So I guess we're gonna make something out of cherry or maple. Maybe just veneer the cabinet. Maybe that's the way to go. Just build it out of whatever. Lots of hardwood. We got gobs of cherry wood. This is all poplar, that's not maple. Then we got shit tons of walnut, but no walnut plywood. And veneer and walnut, so I think that's what we're gonna do. I do have a bunch of this walnut veneer, but they're all just scraps, so anyway. We'll figure this thing out. We're gonna make it out of something, I know that. All right, so literally I've just written down some basic dimensions. Our top is going to be 60 by 18. We got our sides are going to be 35 by 18. Our toe kick is just 3 inches by 58.5. Then we got our frame and panels, which we'll probably make out of poplar wood. Those are going to be 59.25 by 17.75. And looks like we need 3 of them. So yeah, this is just the basic components of this thing, and I'll kind of show you how we do this. All right, let's get cracking on this thing. We're going to cut our parts down on our panel saw here, and you see that I don't always like to wear shoes when I work. It's the thing about having your own shop. We'll whack up these parts from our cut list I showed you earlier, and we'll get this cabinet going. We got to cut out our toe kick here, make a little notch here. I'll show you how I cut out with these little haunch cuts on a table saw. It's a good little way to cut things out. Makes nice square cuts, which is probably the most important thing. But it goes very quickly. Dust collector doesn't pick up much of the dust, but again, it's better than some of the alternative ways to do it. All right, so I went ahead and I pre-mapped this particular panel, and we're gonna match it over onto our other panel. So, you know, what I've done is I know where my toe kick's gonna be. So I ran a 3/4 inch line along here because I know that I'm gonna have a framing panel that's gonna come this way, okay? Then I've taken my dimension from the top of my framing panel to the top of my cabinet, or excuse me, to the top of this panel, and I've taken that dimension. That dimension is 30.5, okay? Now, I don't need to account for anything at the top of my cabinet because the top panel actually rests on top of the base panel. So it's not gonna butt up to it, it's not gonna do anything goofy. It literally sets on top, which is a little, it's kind of old school. So anyway, the dimension here, 30.5, okay? Now, the math works out that we want 3 drawer boxes that are the same height. We know we need 2 more framing panels to essentially go between each one of these drawer boxes. So I'm going to take the thickness, which is 3/4 of an inch, of each one of these framing panels, and I'm going to subtract it from my overall. So my overall, 30.5, I'm gonna subtract 3/4 and 3/4, which is 1.5 inches, which is gonna take me down to 29 inches, okay? Then I'm gonna divide 29 by 3. Okay, when I divide 29 by 3, I come up with 9.66, okay? So what I do is I measure over 9.66, and I've made a mark. Then I burn my inch here, and I measure my 3/4 to make sure that I'm very accurate. And I'm gonna come back over again, do that 9.66, burn in that inch, which makes it 10.66. Add that 3/4, and same thing. I should end up with 9.66, which I'm very close. So that gives me equal sized drawer boxes spaced on this 35-inch tall cabinet. So now I need to trace all that onto my other cabinet, or excuse me, my other end panel. So what I'm gonna do, an end panel over here, line these things up. I'll go ahead and just make myself a couple of marks. And not that this really matters, you're gonna cut all this on the table saw at the same time. But because we're basically building, we're just building off of our head, we're not using a drawing. We're just building from scratch, you know. And I have built these before, so I'm kind of familiar with the dimensions. But we're just building from scratch. You don't need a drawing to make furniture. Like if you understand standard dimensions for things, you can make just about anything. So, all right, so I've transferred my lines. I'll take my combination square here. Give myself some lines. There.
Still I run toward the wind and let the challenge draw me in, 'cause I want more.
So now we have reference lines for where our frame panels are going to go. So I'll go over to my table saw. I'm going to set up my dado stack, and I'll go ahead and I'll dado in these, and then we'll get on to making our actual framing panels. So we're going to dado these down 3/8 of an inch, and they're obviously 3/4 tall. We're also going to add a 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch deep rabbet along there. These panels will be good to go then. Our toe kick will butt right up to here. You can see we have some lines kind of going on there. So anyway, so those are kind of the next steps at this point. I'll do some quick dadoing on our end panels here, knock these out, move on to our framing panels, which the next part. So we're going to pull some stock here to make these framing panels. Most of my stock is going to be 2 inches. That's what I generally do for all my framing panels. Wherever I have a vertical plywood panel or a vertical hardwood panel, whatever, I'll generally use a 3-inch piece. That gives me ample room to put in dado to stack panels. So all the stock you're going to see here is going to be 2-inch. Just know that where there is a vertical panel, I'll generally use something that's about 3 inches thick. Also gives you a place to put rest your drawer slides if you're using undermount drawer slides. So another good reason to use 3-inch stock. Here we're going to set up our rabbet cut for our framing panel ends. So this is just your typical tongue and groove. You can kind of see here real quick. Slow the video down to show you how the tongue fits in the groove just fine there. And then we'll speed this back up, and we're going to cut all these real quick. This is how I do it. So here we've got to mark basically our A panel, which is going to be our base framing panel. So we'll start here. The overall on this piece is 59 1/4. So we have a center panel that's going to go in here. So we need to account for that. So 59 1/4 subtract 3/4 is going to get us to 58.5. And then we can divide that number by 2. 58.5 is going to get us down to 29 1/4. So 29 1/4 is going to be our base kind of measurement. So with 29 1/4, we'll go ahead and add in that 3/4 of an inch for our center panel. And we can measure the other way to make sure that we're correct. Yes, we're 29 1/4. So we'll grab our combination square. We'll make sure that our ends are lined up. And we'll go ahead and add these lines here, or reference lines for where our dado is going to go. And again, this will be a 3/8 deep dado that is 3/4 of an inch wide. Base panel, okay, so that's panel A. We'll go ahead and put our parts up here for panel B. Now panel B will have the same thing going on. We're going to mark 29 1/4, and we'll add in that 3/4, and we will add our reference lines. Now this panel is different because we're going to have dados on the underside, and then we're also going to have dados on the top side. So all of our dados in this case are going to be 1/4 of an inch thick. So this is panel B. Now we need to come to the other side. And when you do the same thing, we gotta do some more math, because we have to have dados on the bottom side and the top side of this framing panel. So we're gonna go ahead and measure this at 29 1/4, just like the other side, and we'll go 3/4 of an inch over again. And just like before, we're gonna take our combo square, trace some reference lines, okay? So that is panel B. Now panel C is our uppermost mid panel, and then of course we have the top panel. So this one, we're gonna have these same dados that we've been talking about in panel A and panel C on the bottom side. Now on the top side of this panel, there's actually gonna be 3 drawers instead of 2. So we have to make our calculations for the additional set of vertical panels that are gonna go with this. So just like before, we're gonna measure over 29 1/4. Add that 3/4 of an inch. We'll go ahead and use our combo square and add our lines, reference lines. And this is panel C. This is the bottom side. So now the top side, we're gonna turn this. We're gonna do our math on this panel, which I'll do right now. So we'll go ahead and pull out our calculator. We're gonna go 59.25. We're gonna subtract for the 2 vertical panels that we're gonna have in this case, which is gonna be 1.5 inches because they're 3/4 of an inch thick. So subtract 1.5, and we're left with 57.75. Now 57.75 has to be divided by 3 because we're gonna have 3 cavities for our drawer box. So divide that number by 3, and we come up with 19 1/4. So we're gonna measure over 19 1/4, and we'll go ahead and add our 3/4. We're going to measure over again 19 1/4, which when you burn an inch is 20 1/4. Add that 1/4 inch. So when we measure from the other side, we should be approximately 19 1/4, which we are. So we know that our dimensions are good. So just like before, we're going to go ahead, add our combination square. You see I have to pinch this stock because it's just a little bit bowed, but that's okay. Add our reference line too. All right, so now we can add in all of our dados to these panels, and we can start building up these framing panels, and the dados again will already be there. Get them into our cabinet and potentially get this cabinet assembled. And right now I'm marking center on all these pieces so that they can line up with the dados that we've added previously in the video to the different panels. So stuff, because everything's pre-marked, it goes together very quickly, and make sure all my joints fit really well. Check my dimensions, and I will make sure that I get my center panels and check that all these center panels fit correctly. And I think I made these center panels out of MDF. And once everything fits well, I go ahead and clamp it all up, and I'll go ahead and do that now. And I just glue and clamp. I don't run any nails or anything like that in here. I'm just going to glue and clamp all this stuff up because it's just a tried and true method. Clamping lasts forever as long as you take the time to do it. A lot of companies don't, or a lot of people don't do that. They kind of half-ass clamp it and then run nails in it that I've seen to kind of hold that joint so they can move forward. Yeah, just clamp it, make sure it's square, and we'll do that for all of our framing panels here, and move on. Now here, I'm heading over to my saw. So some of my center panels are too fat, so I'm gonna cut a quick little rabbet in them so that they'll fit correctly, and then I put the rabbet side down so that it's never seen. Next, we need to cut all of our dados. So I set up my dado blade here and run these framing panels through there. And because I have a lot of different dados to cut on these panels, some of them have to be cut with my router because it's not very safe to cut them on the table saw. So I go ahead and I do that with my router and a straight edge. And of course I use double-sided tape. I'm always talking about the amazing double-sided tape. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just cutting all these dados kind of the hard way. If you have a sliding table saw, it would be a lot faster, a lot easier, but I don't. I had mentioned it before, and I'll say it again, that a lot of these dados are going to be 1/4 inch deep as opposed to the traditional 3/8 deep, because we're stacking panels on both sides, so bear that in mind.
Hello world, wake me up to another good morning, time to go.
Here I'm doing a quick check fit of my panels to make sure that they fit in the end panel, and it looks like they're fitting okay. Might have one that needs to go a bit deeper, or might need to open up that dado just a tiny bit. But things are fitting in there fairly good. They're semi-snug, which is nice. Front to back looks good. The dados that are going to be in the center of our dresser, they're cut in there. You can notice they're 1/4 inch. There's a couple of 3/8 inch as well. But these are going to hold all of our vertical panels. Now here I'm going to go ahead and I'm laying out where I'm going to put all my festival dominoes. So the top is actually going to be butted up to the end panels. There's no special joinery here. There's just these dominoes we're going to put in here. So I'm going to map all these out, make sure that the dominoes from the top panel match the end panel correctly. Taking my square and I'm just carrying those lines over so that my domino tool lines up. So here we'll go ahead and we're going to pop all these in, and these you want to go at least 1 inch into the end panel. You can really go as deep as you want, but that's what we have going on here, going all the way down. Now when we do the top panel can only go down 5/8, so you need to set your domino up to go to the correct depth, otherwise you'll just blow right through, you know, which I guess technically would be fine since we're veneering this cabinet, but you don't want to do that, so set it at 5/8. So now we'll go ahead and we're going to drive in all these dominoes with our hammer here. We'll take a quick peek at this, make sure everything's going to fit correctly, kind of beat on this thing to get everything to line up, and everything fits good. So we can deconstruct this thing once we get a good look at it, and we'll go ahead and start gluing this cabinet up so you can see the joint there. Now here I'm going to go ahead and throw all this glue on this thing, and I'm going to fit all my end panels in there, my framing panels, and we'll go ahead and put the top on, put the other side on, and I'll grab my buddy over here, and we'll get this thing clamped up and get it put on the bench where we can do the final glue up. All right, so here we're going to go ahead and fit in all of these vertical panels that are going to separate the framing panels and provide more structure for our cabinet. So you can see I'm test fitting all these panels, and they go in, fairly well, but some are really tight. And so I'm going to yank these panels out. I'm going to increase the size of my dado, and on the other ones, I'm going to either cut down the vertical panels or increase the depth of my dados so that I hit all of my dimensions on my dresser. So the left side has to be exactly the same as the right side, and then the center has to be the same as the left and right side. It's very important that, because this is a campaign style piece of furniture, that everything is as flat as it possibly can be. So here I'm going to check all of my dimensions. Super important to have every dimension be the same. Flatness is super important with this particular cabinet because it is a campaign style piece of furniture, and everything needs to be flat along the face and flat along the top. You're much more apt to see variations in the cabinet when it's super flat like this. So here I'm going to clamp everything up, make sure all my joints are nice and tight, slide these vertical panels in place. Now that they all fit correctly, put all our dominoes in on our top panel, glue everything in, match the dados from the framing panel to the top panel, and slid these panels in here. I've thrown a straight edge on top of here because, again, flatness is super important. You should have a nice straight edge on there to make sure that your cabinet is, again, flat. I can't stress it enough how important it is to be flat, especially on a campaign piece of furniture. There's no trim or depth to hide the flatness of your cabinet. Now here I'm throwing in a whole bunch of squaring blocks. I've done videos on squaring blocks. It's super important to throw those in wherever you can. It just aids in making sure that your cabinet is as square as it possibly can be, and you don't have to constantly be checking it. There I'm throwing up a straight edge on the back. Now here's a quick overview of the cabinet itself. Of course, we have a straight edge on top to make sure everything is nice and flat. You can see the squaring blocks are even on the outside of the cabinet to make sure that the cabinet is, again, square. Just lots of clamps, lots of squaring blocks, lots of straight edges to keep this cabinet. It'll be so much easier to put this cabinet together when it comes time to do the drawer boxes with a very straight, square, flat cabinet. Here we're going to throw on our toe kick. This is something that I do after the cabinet's all dry. I guess technically you could do it during the regular Carcass assembly, but I don't. I just throw a couple of spacer blocks down below, and I'll put this toe kick on now. This piece is simply just glued on. I throw a bunch of clamps on it, and then I will nail the shit out of it so that it stays in place. Same thing along the back side. Throw our back structural support on the back. And here I'm attaching a couple of blocks. These blocks are simply to help hold the toe kick on, since we don't actually have a dado to hold that toe kick in place. So I throw a couple of blocks in there, and again, we're just going to clamp it and nail it. Now here I'm getting ready to put the nailer in the back of the cabinet. This helps us to keep structure in the back of the cabinet, to keep it rigid, because over time everyone's going to drag your cabinet around, so a nailer is really important. Plus it gives something that someone could actually screw the cabinet to a wall if they wanted to. We have our Carcass assembled, and I'm getting ready to put in drawer slides, and then I'm going to make some drawer boxes and get my fronts and everything put on, and then I'm finally able to move on to the veneering stage, is what we're ultimately going to do with this. We're going to veneer this thing in walnut, and we will get all of our decorative campaign hardware put on after we do all that. So I'm going to start with talking about the kind of slides we're going to use. These are undermount slides. They are made by Bloom, and they're phenomenal. Modern customers want these kind of features, especially my customers. Basically, you just have a front locking device, and then you have a smooth ball bearing undermount mechanism. These particular locking devices have two-way adjustability. They can be adjusted from left to right here, and they can be adjusted up and down. So the front goes up and down. The rotating side is left to right. There's an adjustment on the very back of the slide that you can rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. That will kick the back of the drawer box up, if you need to. So you got a little bit of adjustment there as well. So anyway, these are very user-friendly. They're very nice slides. I get more and more customers that want them. I try and get people to use side mount slides because they're super easy to install. Not that these are difficult, but I've installed those for decades, So anyway, I'm very familiar with them. But this is what customers want. And if you want to sell furniture that people actually want, you have to give them features that they actually want. And if your intent is to sell them an old looking piece of furniture with old looking features, you're going to limit the pool of potential customers to buy your product. So offer them features that they want, offer them features that are modern. The side note on that is don't give them too many options. Like some people, just want to offer everything under the sun. And truth is, people suck at making decisions. So if you just have a couple of options, this is what you get, make your life a lot easier. So something that I want to talk about with the Carcass of this particular cabinet is that because this is a campaign dresser, Campaign is known for having a very flat front, right? It's a very boxy piece of furniture. So obviously the top is going to be flat, the sides need to be flat, but more importantly, the face needs to be very flat. It needs to be as straight as you can get it and as square as you can get it. It'll make your life a lot easier, because what happens when you're installing drawer boxes is, if your drawer boxes are installed correctly, they're going to be relatively square along the face of the cabinet because they're lined up based off of the location of your shelves, right? If shelves are level, then when you put the drawer front on your drawer box, you know, theoretically the drawer front should be square. As you're putting all these drawer fronts on here, if you're a little bit out in one direction or another, that's going to show, right? Which, it's not a problem. You can fix it if it's minor. It's not a big deal, but you're going to save yourself some time of trying to adjust all of these drawer boxes to fit the face of your cabinet. Whereas the straighter you get it and the squarer you get it, you'll be able to, for the most part, just put those drawer boxes in there. The fronts are all going to line up and you're going to be super happy. But odds are that's not going to happen when you make one of these. Later on in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how we make the drawer front line up with whatever the front of the cabinet is doing. You know, that involves basically a sander and a pencil. But like I said, I'll go into detail on that a little bit later. So again, important things are the front of the cabinet is as flat and as straight as you can get it. Take a straight edge and put it from one corner to the other corner and kind of look and see where all of your framing panels are lining up. Put it the other way, check, and make sure, see if you have any kind of rock. And if you can take any of that rock out, that's good. Do it now. It'll make your life easier. And if you can't take that rock out, like, no worries. We'll deal with it. You know, no one's perfect, and hell, I'm not either. This cabinet is not perfect by any means. So come in here and kind of see some of the things that I got to fix. You can see that my dado there is clearly too big, so I'm gonna have to fill that in. And you can see up here, I actually put my dado in the wrong location, so I had to kind of cheat that thing over, make my dado bigger. So we're gonna fill that in as well. Then you can look down here, I cut my dado in completely the wrong location, so we'll fill that in. So yeah, cabinet makers make mistakes. I'm always saying, you know, the test of a cabinet maker isn't what he can make, it's what he can fix, and I still believe that. So anyway, this cabinet's looking pretty good. It's fairly straight, but we'll deal with any inconsistencies when we go to put all these drawer boxes in. I'll show you how I do that. Here we're going to go ahead and put in all of our slides. These are 15-inch undermount balloon slides, and they're heavy. Each one of these slides weighs about 2.5 pounds. So by the time you get all these slides in here, it's going to add a ton of weight to this cabinet. But they work phenomenally. People love them. Anyway, I use a 3/4 inch washer head screw to attach all of these, and I'm taking a square here and I'm just setting the depth of where I want all of these drawer boxes to go. And the depth that I set back is basically going to be 3/4 of an inch. Now here we're going to go ahead and cut up all of our drawer box material. The first thing we have to do though is we don't have stock that's consistently over 8 inches, which is what we need for our drawer box. So we're going to go ahead and mill all this 5/4 up, and we're going to cut it up so that when we glue it together, we have something that is over 8 inches. I think we end up with something like 8.5, 9 inches after it's all said and done. So we start by ripping it, of course, through the table saw. Then we'll take it over to the planer and we'll plane it up, so they have a good smooth surface for gluing. And I'm just planing up one side. I'm not planing up everything. Go ahead and throw all our glue on here. I use a brush, just a cheap little brush. Spread all that glue on there, and we can go ahead and clamp this up. And we'll have to do several of these to get enough material for these 7 drawer boxes. Each one of these drawer boxes is 8 inches tall. And so yeah, it uses a good chunk, it uses a good amount of hardwood. Now that we've glued up all of our material, we're going to set up our saw. We're basically going to fillet these pieces through the saw, basically about 1/2 inch. And we'll fillet them on the table saw, raise that blade up a couple inches. Then we're going to take over our bandsaw. We're going to finish doing the work of filleting these pieces with the bandsaw. Once we do the bandsaw, of course, we'll take it over to the planer. We're going to plane it all up, so we have nice, consistent 3/8 thick drawer boxes. A lot of people like to use 1/2 inch. Old manufacturers use 3/8, so I use 3/8 plus the weight. The savings in weight from that 1/8 inch doesn't seem like a lot, but it does add up into pounds. so it's worth it to have a skinnier drawer box if you can get away with it. So here we'll cut this material up. Now we're going to run this through our miter lock bit. I do all my drawer boxes using a miter lock. So they sell different miter lock bits on Amazon or Rockler or Woodcrafty, one of those places. But you have a male side and a female side. Female side. The side you saw before was the male side. The trick to miter locks is to have great vacuum. You don't want to have any chips. Here we're going to assemble our drawer box. So I'll take this thing apart, stick some glue in it, and I'm going to clamp it up. I know the center panel fits good. I've test fit all these parts. So we'll go ahead and throw more glue on the end panels here, and then we will clamp this thing up. I'm using 1/2-inch blocks of hardwood on the ends when I clamp this thing up to get even pressure. I'm going to check the sink for square. I don't want to over clamp it, but then I am done. Now moving over here, we're going to sand our drawer box after it's dried. I just got a little Festool sand here. I'm going to sand it up to 150. I'll go ahead and sand the top to remove any mill marks, and then I'll go ahead and break all the edges. That looks nice. We'll go ahead and we'll cut our 1 3/8" relief cuts for our undermount slides. And then here I'm popping this drawer in here, and I'm going to bump it and then pull it out so I get some notches here that I can then hit with my Forstner bit. This is a 1/4-inch Forstner bit. I'll go ahead and attach all my locking devices with some 3/8 screws. Now here I'm attaching triangular blocks of wood. Once I know my drawer box is nice and square, I'm going to CA glue these triangle blocks of wood in here because that just adds to the strength of the drawer box and will allow it to last a long time. Here what I'm doing is I am going ahead and adding all of my holes for my screws to attach the drawer front to the drawer box. These are just 3/16 holes. I fasten all of my drawer fronts using a 7/8 washer head screw that I believe is a number 8 or a number 10. It's pretty coarse threaded screw. They work really well. You can pull them out and put it back in many times and it doesn't strip out the wood. So here I'm adding double-sided tape to all my drawer fronts because I need to attach all the fronts, and double-sided tape is how we do it. So here you'll see I'm putting a shim on the bottom of the opening, and I'm going to put that drawer box in there, and then I push on the back of the drawer box and I hold the drawer front, and that sets the drawer front to the drawer box, and then I can go in and I can add my screws to permanently attach the front. And this is a good way to do it because if you have to take your fronts off, these screws fit perfectly when you reattach it. There's no slop, which is what you want. If you're going to gap something, you don't want there to be slop every time you take the drawer front off. So here I'm just gapping my drawer boxes. I've got a little 1000 shim that I use, and I will mark all along my cabinet where the gapping chip is, and then I will go over and I will sand or I will cut it on the table saw till I get the gap that I'm looking for, which in this case is 0.10 of an inch. When we add the edge banding on, it'll close that gap up to 0.06 of an inch, which is a fantastic looking gap. Here we're looking at the gapping of our drawer boxes. I'm going to open up one of these drawers, and you're going to notice that the gap has been sanded to match the frame and panel. There's a little bit of a sag in one of my panels, and so I'm gapping the drawer front to fit it. Here we're just looking at the back. The back fits in there nice. It's I've mapped out on the back where I need all my screws to go. Now here I'm doing a little bit of more gapping, kind of looking at this thing and making sure that my gaps are good. Now here is the drawer front is setting back, you can see a little bit, and then other places it's setting proud a little bit. And this is what I was talking about in the earlier part of the video about adjusting these drawer boxes. Gapping chip, and I marked it on my drawer box so I can see how much I've removed. I'll take the drawer front off and I'm left with the drawer box, and here I'm going to scribble on here with a pencil. And then actually I'm going to go ahead and go to a pen because I do need to take off a little bit more, and that pen is going to seep down into that wood further than pencil. So then I'm going to set this up, put a couple of clamps on here, and I'm going to take a belt sander and I'm going to feather sand this cabinet. And this is how you get the drawer front to kind of do what you want it to do without using the slides so much. Right? This allows that box to move the way that you want it to move and line up nicely with the front of your cabinet. Alright, so our cabinet is sanded. Now we're going to lay out our veneer. We're going to try and figure out what's the best looking piece of veneer. You know, we'll kind of move this thing around and figure out where we want our flitch lines to line up. What's has the most character, or in some cases the least character. Find that piece, map or mark it out, and then we're going to go ahead and just cut this thing up. And I'm going to look here. I'm going to mark some lines on the cabinet you'll see there, and then I mark those lines on the piece of veneer as well, so that I can place this exactly where I want it after I've glued it up. Now here I'm going to run this cabinet into my spray booth, and I'm going to go ahead and spray on my contact adhesive. Now I just use a Wilsonart contact adhesive. You notice the contact adhesive in this case is yellow. You know, you really want a clear contact adhesive. This is just what I have laying around, so it's what I'm using. Generally we paint furniture, we don't do a ton of stained stuff, so that's kind of what you're looking at. But the cabinet's nice and clean. You can see the body filler, and it's ready to go. So here I'm going to load up this gun with some glue. This glue is specifically made for spraying, so pay attention to what you're buying. Don't buy something that's a roll-on and try and put it in a paint gun. So the paint gun's new, so I'm trying to kind of dial this thing in. I'll mess with the pressure and the fan, get to where I'm relatively happy with it, and we'll go ahead and spray this cabinet. And once the cabinet's done, we'll go ahead and drag our piece of veneer in here, and I set up this little makeshift table with some cardboard on it, and we'll go ahead and spray the top of this as well. Make sure your surfaces are clean. Now coming over here, you notice I put some sticks down. This helps you to line up exactly where I want this veneer to go. I don't ever want to be in a hurry. So the sticks help keep this up above the contacted surface, and I'll just pull these sticks out and work this thing down, and I'll roll the shit out of it. And I'm going to hit it with a router next to knock off all the excess material. And this just uses a regular old, I think they call it a templating bit. And anyway, we'll go ahead and sand it up close. We're going to move on to the sides. So same process with the sides. We make sure our veneer is clean. A lot of times I'll wipe it down with naphtha or even acetone. Make sure there's no oils and stuff on there. And then I'll go ahead and spray it. Same deal here. I'm going to spray the side of this cabinet. I'm using some masking paper along the top so that glue doesn't get on there. Just save us a little bit of work. If the glue gets on there, no big deal. You can wipe it off with acetone. Acetone will not hurt veneer or any wood for that matter. So same deal. Roll it, router it off, and we're going to sand it. You notice here I'm using a little 2-inch, 2-pound roller as opposed to that big I think it was like an 8-inch roller that I was using before. I put a little bit of blue tape on there, you noticed, and that just keeps the bearing from leaving any kind of an impression on the veneer. It's not necessary, but I use a lot of tape, so I don't care. Now, the face is a little bit different. The face is kind of tricky. So the cabinet itself is going to have to be laid over onto the veneer. And being that I'm a one-man show today, I'm going to do this all myself. It is much easier if you have 2 people. But I'm tape up all of my drawer sides because I don't want them to fall out. Now I'll line this thing up so I got basically, you know, maybe a 3/4 of an inch all the way around here. And then the bottom, you notice the bottom is long, and that's because I need a piece for my toe kick, right? And since I want every piece of grain to line up on this cabinet, I will make sure to mark that. Now here I'm marking the inside of this cabinet. I'm gonna trace along the openings, and this will tell me where I need to cut, right? One thing you can do is you can add a shim to everywhere that you are tracing that will give you the correct gap to cut to, but for purposes of teaching you this, I'm going to do this all by hand, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later in this video. Here you can see all my marks. Everything looks really nice and clear. I didn't miss anything this time, and yeah, it looks good. All right, the tip here when cutting out veneer with very, very, very fine, very high accuracy, it's important to have a thin straight edge, preferably one that's made of steel, but mine's the one I got's aluminum, so I guess I can go find a steel one, but steel's gonna work best because your blade won't eat into it, right? Whereas aluminum, there is a chance for that thing to walk a little bit. Aluminum's not preferable, it's fine, but just bear that in mind. Your razor blade will not eat into steel the way it's gonna eat into aluminum. The other thing is to use a lot of sharp razor blades, right? You may only get, you know, 1 2 dozen cuts before you're gonna flip that razor blade onto the other side, okay? So it's important that you keep a nice fresh razor blade in your tool because you don't wanna be using excess pressure as you're pulling, okay? And when you pull, you're only pulling up to, you know, a point that you're comfortable with, maybe 2 or 3 inches from the other quarter, right? You're pulling from quarter to corner, but you're not gonna go to that final quarter. You're gonna stay a good couple inches away, because you are always pulling. You're always pulling to a safety zone. You're never gonna pull to the final spot because you're not that accurate, right? You're gonna slip, it's gonna happen. You might hit it 4 or 5 times in a row, but that 5th or 6th time, you're gonna pull too far, right? And then you can't go back, right? You do not want to slice through your veneer. The idea here is to be cautious and to be precise in every pull that you make. You don't want to get, you know, in a hurry. There's no point, because once you make that mistake, the world that I come from in aerospace, you cut that veneer, you're done. There's just no hiding it, right? And you got people paying millions of dollars for the interiors on their jets. They don't want to see your cuts that you made mistakes on, okay? So it's important that you cut correctly the first time. So anyway, I'm gonna go through this and make these cuts and kind of show you what it is that I do. And I'll do a time lapse so you can kind of watch me work through all 7 of these drawer fronts and then work through the face frame itself. And then we'll put this thing on the cabinet and it'll be dope. I mean, it'll be really cool. And I hope you can use this technique in the future when you are doing veneer work, because not everyone notices it. That's the thing, right? Not everyone notices that grain. But once you show them that all the grains line up, they can never unsee it, okay? So anytime they look at a cabinet that comes from Crate and Barrel, or a cabinet that comes from one of these other companies, Restoration Hardware, like all these companies that do make furniture, Pottery Barn, you know, you're gonna notice that none of them do it, you know, because it's too time consuming, it's too labor intensive, right? And the object is to make money, you know? So anyway, we do this, we make money on our stuff. It can be done, but it's not easy, right? If we had to ramp this up and do this on full production mode, I don't know that we could. But because it's my time and it's a personal pride thing to me, I try to always grain match all my pieces if I can. Okay, so here I am using a 600 shim, right? It's actually a popsicle stick. And I'm putting that shim up to the edge of what I've traced out on my veneer here. And then I'm marking a bunch of lines. Now all these lines are important because they're the lines that I'm going to use with my steel straight edge and my aluminum straight edge to map out all of these individual drawer fronts. You can see I'm taking this, it's an 18-inch scale or blade from a Starrett combination square, and I'm pulling this razor blade towards me. Now I'm coming up about an inch short of where I need to be, and I'm running through razor blades. So maybe every, I don't know, 12 or 13th cut, I'm turning the blade or I'm putting a new blade into my razor blade. You can see there's razor blade number 1. I left it on the table there. So now I've got this framing square, and I put a piece of tape on there to kind of help hold it almost as like a second hand. And I'm using it to cut a nice straight line, and now I'm going to pull out the first front, right? And the front I'm just going to go put on the cabinet, and I'm going to work on the next one, and I'm going to continue to do this till I get all 7 of these fronts cut out. And again, every maybe 12, 13, 14th cut, I'm going to pull it, or I'm going to put in a new razor blade. So don't be stingy with your razor blades. You want nice clean cuts. It's going to save you aggravation later on.
We are all looking for adventure. 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 We are all looking for
Now I've got my fronts here. I'm going to label all these fronts with the corresponding drawers. In this case, 1 through 7. And I'll also mark an up arrow. Now here I'm setting my face frame onto, or my face sheet onto the front of my cabinet. And I'm checking to make sure that I have a little bit of a lip everywhere, and I do. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this up. And it's actually better to do the cabinet side first because the spray-on glue tends to dry faster than the glue you put on with a brush. So here I'm cleaning the face of this cabinet. I'm using a wood block to make sure there's no burrs or anything on there. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe it down with a little bit of naphtha. And then I'll go ahead and take a brush, a 2-inch paintbrush, and a cup of this Wilsonart contact adhesive, and I'm going to put this on here, and I'll put it on kind of thick, to be honest with you. Like it's going to drip a little bit, and that's fine. When it drips, we can clean all that up with acetone later on. I'm not worried about it. But I'm going to go ahead and put this stuff on. Now I put craft paper down here, and this craft paper keeps this veneer from sticking, right? So I can pull that first sheet off once I know I have this paper where I want it. I just work that craft paper back as I get the veneer put on there. And I'll go ahead and I'll roll it with my little 2-pound roller. And just like before, I'm going to put a little bit of tape on the outside of my cabinet here, and I'll run my router along that. So you notice that when I routed the outside of the trim, or the veneer, I did not route the inside. And the reason I didn't route the inside is because you want to have that extra material just in case your pieces are too small, right? Your cutouts are too small. It gives you a little bit of extra fudge factor to kind of get really nice looking gaps. So we'll take care of the inside gaps here a little bit later. But yeah, I did not route the inside for a reason. We're going to go ahead and glue up our drawer boxes, and we'll go ahead and glue up the veneer drawer front pieces as well. And you'll see that when I'm spraying this, I'm just kind of hanging back and I'm spraying from side to side. I don't need to mask anything off because where the glue goes, the overspray isn't going to go onto any part of the drawer box I'm not worried about. So there's no need to, mask up your drawer boxes. And here, of course, we'll hit the fronts of the veneer. And again, because everything's labeled, I know where everything's going. And here I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to line up the veneers, right? Start at the top, get happy with it, and then rub it down. Hit it with my little 2-pound roller, and then I'll move on to the next one. Same deal. And I start at the top. I kind of look at for a distinct feature within the grain, and I line up the right side, and then I look and I line up the left side, and I kind of have the veneer turned in such a way that it doesn't stick, right? I give myself a little bit of leeway there. And yeah, I'll go ahead and stick this stuff down one at a time, roll it, make sure it's on there very well. When doing these bigger sheets, it's the same thing. They're not so long you have to worry about it too much. You can go ahead and just line them up, starting at the right, kind of work your way to the left, roll it all down. Like I said, in aerospace, we did so much of this. I mean, big sheets of veneer, you just kind of becomes almost second nature. It's not, I don't really think about it too much. I've just done so much of it over the years. But in the event that you get a piece that doesn't line up correctly, you can pull it off with a little bit of lacquer thinner, or even a little bit of acetone. Lacquer thinner works better because it doesn't gum up. So here, I put a little bit of blue tape on my front, and I have a jig. You'll see I'm sticking it on there. I'm double sticking that on, and I'm routering out the opening for our campaign military pull hardware. Got a little bit of a chisel there. I'm going to chisel in the rounded areas, make them nice and sharp, because the back side of the military pull is very square. Now here, I'm going to pop in a couple of holes. You can just look at the back of the military pull and see exactly where that hardware needs to go. I'm going to cut some screws, a little screw cutter here, because there's an oddball screw that fits in there. We'll go ahead and run these screws in there and get that pull to suck up nice and tight. It's important that that pull sits very flat. You don't want to have any gapping. Now here, I'm going to go ahead and edge band my fronts. Now you can do iron-on. For this particular purpose, I didn't have any iron-on, so I just cut up some veneer from my cabinet, and I'm going to put some contact adhesive on the front, put a little bit of contact adhesive on the strips that I cut out. You see I'm just going to spray a bunch of them here. Then I can just pull those off as needed while I'm edge banding all these drawer fronts. Just roll it on with my little 2-pound roller. And I like to file my veneer. I file it with a metal file actually. And it cuts that veneer really well, and then I can do a little bit of sanding to it, and it looks really good. So that's my process for edge banding. Okay, let's take a second look at our finished product here. Of course, minus some of our hardware. This is before it's going to go into the paint booth for clear coat. But you can see the grains look really nice. The color's really nice. We have matching grains right here, which is good. And along the face of the cabinet, there's of course matching grains. The drawer boxes look good. and everything seems to open and function as it should. We have a nice smooth operation, and if you look at the gaps, the gapping looks consistent, and yeah, it's going to be a nice looking piece, but you can see all the grains match, which is a very good sign of quality. We do have some drawer adjustments to make. Now we're going to put this in the booth, and I've disassembled it, and it is being clear coated with a matte clear lacquer. You can see we got the first coat on there, and it actually looks like there's some dry spots right, so we'll go in for a second coat, and he'll hit it one more time and get a nice wet kind of a look. And as the stuff dries, it's going to dry to a matte finish. But yeah, he does a great job, and this piece turned out beautifully, as you saw at the very beginning of the video. Now here I'm going to go ahead and take all of my fronts that are now dry, and I'm going to attach them to my boxes and get this thing back together, make sure it looks good, make sure it operates the way it did before when we took it apart. Excuse me. So yep, go put these 7 fronts on, and then I will start attaching the hardware, the military poles. These are very kind of iconic furniture for this particular style of furniture, the campaign. Anyway, go ahead and get all these put on, and then I'm going to move over to getting the actual accent pieces installed. And these accent pieces were actually installed because this is inspired by military furniture, and those accent pieces are actually there to take the brunt of the abuse of travel, because in the military, furniture was meant to be moved around quite a bit, and if you had this metal corner covers and things of that nature, it would keep the damage limited. Now here you can see that I am attaching all this hardware. Okay, now getting on to the last part of this, we have to attach all of our campaign hardware. So here I'm showing you just what I do. I got rubber gloves on. These are nitrile rubber gloves, so that it doesn't get oils on the brass. So I'm going to put a little bit of blue tape on here once I kind of know right where I want this particular T-piece. You'll see I put that tape on there, and then I'm going to grab myself a tiny drill, like a 1/16 inch drill bit. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drill 2 holes here as kind of my preliminary holes. And I drill those in about 1/4 inch, and then I've got a 3/4 inch brass nail here. And I'm going to go ahead and drilling that hole allows me to put that nail in there without too much trouble. And I go ahead and tap that thing in there. I've got a nail set here because the nails are panhead. So I'm going to tap that in place until it is in all the way. Then next I can go ahead and I can drill in the rest of the holes that I have here, and I'll go ahead and follow the same process as before. I'll take that nail set and a hammer, and I'll go ahead and tap the remaining nails in. And I'll do this for the entire cabinet, and I think there's 4 L-shaped and 7 T-shaped pieces of trim that go on this cabinet. There's 7 military poles that go on this cabinet. And yeah, that's how I do it. And again, wearing the nitrile gloves just keeps you from having to wipe this trim down so much. I don't believe that this brass is lacquered. I forget if it is or not, but it's just anymore, it's just habit. I don't want my greasy fingers all over any kind of brass hardware. To marker the edges of your veneer so that you don't see any white edges. And I'm using a little Mohawk dark walnut marker to do that. Lastly, we will wipe down our cabinet with naphtha. I'll do all the drawer fronts to make sure there's no marker on there, and I will wipe down the rest of the cabinet with naphtha to make sure there's no other residual oils or stuff on there. So it's just a good way to clean that cabinet up and make it nice and pretty.